now that we have our approve function working and updating this approval event and the allowance mapping, let's build out our transfer from function. So just to recap, the transfer from function essentially is the function that allows us to handle this delegated transfer. So the last function, we approved a certain amount, and we stored that amount in this allowance mapping. And in this function, we actually want to execute that transfer. So this is the function that's going to basically act like transfer, but on behalf of a third party. So remember, we said we were approving account B as account A. So I, account A, approve account B to spend C tokens. In this case, account B is spending C tokens on account A, my behalf. So we'll build that out. We see some requirements here that we'll go through. So first, let's just sketch out the function. Function transfer from. And we want to pass it an address from to. Oops. All right, so we'll take a look at that here. So a lot like our other functions, this is a publicly visible function that returns a Boolean, just like these. This denotes the success of our function, and it's going to accept the address of the account that we're transferring from, and accepts the address of the account that we are transferring to, and it accepts the number of tokens that we are going to transfer. So in our case, msg.sender, whoever's calling this function, would be account B, as I've been calling it, and account A is going to be the account that we're transferring from, and we have a new account in this case, which would be account maybe C, that we're transferring to. So there's 3 accounts in this case: the one that's calling the function, the one that we're transferring from, and then the one that we're transferring to. So let's see what needs to go inside this function. We want to, return true, return a Boolean. We want to call the transfer event. Right, so anytime a transfer happens, whether it's inside this transfer function or in the transfer from function, we have to call a transfer event so that we can show that a transfer happened. That's just part of our ERC-20 standard. And we want to set, we want to actually change the balance. And we want to update the allowance. And we also want to add some, requirements here. We want to require that the from account, we'll say this from has enough tokens. And we want to require that the allowance is big enough. Basically, if you were to try to transfer, tokens that were more than the allowance, we want to execute. And if you were also trying to transfer more tokens than the original account had, we also want to execute. Or escape. So this is quite involved here. There's several things that we need to do. We'll step through them one by one. We'll start by writing tests. we'll go over to our test file here, and we'll start a new test that says it, and we'll say this is approved tokens for delegated transfer. We'll say it actually handles delegated transfer. Oops. All right, just like every other test. Oops, sorry. And we'll say return. Actually, I'm just going to copy this. I feel like you all have seen this enough times, so I don't have to repeat myself. And we'll keep track of the instance. And in addition, we're going to do some more setup for this test. Like I said, we need to keep track of 3 accounts. We need to keep track of the account that's calling this function, the account we're sending tokens to, and the account we're sending tokens from. So we can do that like this. We can say from account, and we'll say accounts to. We'll say to account, and we'll call this accounts 3. And we'll say spending account. This is the one that's going to call the function. All right. So yeah, I'm just keeping track of these with some variables so that it's clear what's happening in our test. From to spending, which is the sender, right? So from to, and then msg.sender is going to be the spender. And it's just convenient that that rhymes. So we'll do some setup. We'll actually transfer some tokens. We're going to transfer some tokens to this account so that it actually, has some tokens to transfer. We'll say token instance transfer from account. Oops. All right. So we'll do that. Let's say then. We'll just execute this promise chain here. Oops. Okay. And we'll just say we're going to next approve spending account, spend 10 tokens from account. All right, so we're not actually going to test anything inside here. We're just going to continue executing this promise chain after we did some setup. This basically gave this tokens gave this from account some tokens so that we can actually write some tests. This came from account 0, which has a bunch of tokens, right, already from our test suite. We allocated a whole bunch of tokens to that account when we call our the constructor, and gave it some initial supply. So we've just transferred a bunch of tokens, 100 from that account to this account. And now we want to approve the spending account to spend 10 tokens from this account that we just gave some tokens to. We'll do that like this. We'll say spending account 10 from account. All right. We'll say then function. Get the receipt. Let's actually build out this function a little differently. Let's go ahead and test the requirements of the function first. These require statements, these guards. We'll do that like this. We'll try a test scenario where we say try transferring something larger than the sender's balance. We can do that like this. Token instance. I'll try to call this transfer from account, and then to account. All right, so look here. We have 100 tokens in from account because we set it up that way initially, right? We just transferred some tokens from this account to here so that we had some. And now in this case, we're going to say if this from account, if we're trying to transfer, some tokens from this account, to this account from here to here, we want to try to transfer more than 100 because this account only has 100, and we don't want our function to work if we try to do that. So let's try to transfer some really large amount, right? This is way more than the number of tokens that we actually have here. We want to test that this fails. Right? This is going to be from the spending account, right? This is what we set up here. So just recap. Spending account is calling this function, and it's trying to say, from account, spend more tokens than you have to this account. And we want to, get an exception here. And we can test for that exception like this. Just say assert fail. We can catch. All right. We can say assert that the error message. All right, index of revert. Oops, sorry. I think I might have too many here. Yeah, I do. Index of, sorry guys, my brain is going dead. Revert is greater than or equal to 1, or sorry, 0. And we'll say that, cannot transfer value larger than balance. Right? Let's make sure I don't have any syntax errors here. All right, so we've got that in place. Let's try to run that test. All right, it failed as we expect. Let's actually implement the code to make it pass. So we want to require that from has enough tokens, and we can do that like this. Value, balance of, from. All right. So essentially what we're doing is adding a require statement like we've seen up here in the transfer function. Earlier, we just required that the balance of the sender is more than the value. In this case, we want to require that the balance of the from account, since this is a delegated transfer, is greater than the value. We want to say that they have enough tokens to transfer. So we'll run that. All right, it passes. The next thing we want to test for is require that the allowance is big enough, right? We want to try to ensure that we're not trying to transfer too many tokens, like more than we're actually allowed to. So we'll give that a try. Go to our test file. And we'll just kind of add on to what we've got. We'll say, go here, and we'll say, try transferring something larger than the approved amount. All right. Do that like this. Token instance, transfer from. Oops. We'll say from account, just like this, to account. All right, and we'll say 20. I said 20 because 20 is going to be larger than the amount that we approved here. And it's going to be less than the actual balance. So we want to test like this. This test tested for something bigger than this number, right? This is the total number of tokens that this account would have. And in this case, this is bigger than the approved amount, but smaller than the number of tokens we have. So basically, we want to get past this and get to here, and trigger this exception, and that's how we do that. A number that's in between these two values. If that didn't quite make sense, maybe just kind of mull that over for a second. And we'll say this is from spending account. All right. And just like this, we'll insert an error. And we can say, let's basically copy this. And we'll say cannot transfer, typo, sorry guys. Larger than approved amount. Okay. Close this out. Run our test. See if we had any errors in our test or if this actually fails like we expect. All right, failed like we expect. Test seemed to work fine. So let's implement this. We want to require, that the value is less than or equal to the allowance. All right, let's explain this. So we're reading out of this allowance mapping up here that we created earlier. And we're saying, from this account, the from account, all the approved amount, all the amounts that this account is approved for, we want to find the amount that is calling this function. And we want to require that that's, bigger than the actual value, right? So we're saying that, MSG.sender is the third party here. This is the balance that they are approved to spend on behalf of this from account. And we want to ensure that, there's enough in there to transfer this value. Again, this might be a little complicated at first, but just kind of mull this over and hopefully it'll make sense. So we'll run this test. All right, it passes. All right, so that's done. The next thing we want to do is actually change the balance. We want to run a test for this. Well, actually, let's test the return value first. Let's do this. We will. We're just gonna say this. I'd like to just copy this. Let's try to call this transfer from function again with some valid parameters. So we know that it's approved to transfer 10 tokens. So let's try to transfer 10 tokens. But we want to test the return value of this function. We don't actually want to create a transaction. So we'll do call. All right. Then say success. Oops, sorry. Then function. All right. And we want to say assert equal success true. All right, run this test. All right, it's failing. Expected false to equal true. So we can implement this. Turn true. Run this test again, see if it passes. All right, it passes. So let's go backwards and do our events like we did in the last test. So we want to test that the transfer event is actually called. We can return token instance, transfer from, and well, let's just paste this in here. This time we actually want to create a transaction so that we can inspect the receipt from account to account. We'll do 10, and we'll go from the spending account. This will be the actual function call that we'll kind of use to test the rest of this entire chain. So this is, it's important to know like when you're actually creating transactions and when you're just calling functions. I'm kind of doing these in a specific order for a very specific reason. Because this doesn't change the state of the blockchain. This does, and then we want to test out the result of this continuing down the chain. So at first, I'm going to get the transaction receipt, and that's why I want to test the events here before I test for balances and things like that. So, all right. Then function receipt. And we'll do something similar like we did on all these other tests. I'm actually going to just paste this in here. All right. So we want to assert that the receipt has logs that triggers an event, just like we did in the other specs. It's a transfer event that has the from account, that has the to account, that has the value. So we'll run that test. Make sure there's no problems with our tests. All right, didn't get any events. So our test is working. So we want to call the transfer event here, just like we did in this function. We'll say, actually, let's just do this. We'll do from to value. All right, we're transferring from, transferring to, we're transferring this amount. So it's pretty simple. All right, let's run the test. Uh-oh, I forgot an underscore. That's very important that we keep that in mind. Our local variables, by convention, are going to be prepended with an underscore, and state variables should not be. They should be just like this. So that was my mistake. I accidentally referenced this like a state variable, and it should be a local variable. And I'm kind of leaving these mistakes on the screen just so I can kind of show you all what real development actually looks like. These kind of little hiccups happen, and wanted to just kind of work through them with you. All right, so it looks like something's not working. Stores the allowance for delegated transfer. And again, yeah, it was kind of weird. Had a little issue here with shuffle test. Just reran the test and it actually worked again. So this looks like it might be an intermittent failure. Some of these things happen with shuffle at this kind of stage in the game. Sometimes if you get an error that you don't expect, just try running the test again, see if it passes, and it did. So, all right. Our transfer event is being triggered. And the last thing we want to do, or the last two things, we want to actually change the balance and update the allowance. So we'll change the balance with the test. We'll do that here. Say return. Again, so we've called this transfer from function. Now we're going to try to read the balance to see if this transfer from actually did what we expect it to. We'll say token instance balance of. from account. All right. Then function. And then we'll say balance. All right. We'll assert equal balance to number. We'll say it's equal to 90 because we took 10. Deducts the amount from the sending account. All right. Try to run the test. All right, fails. We also want to test for this token instance balance of the 2 account. And then we'll just paste this here. And we'll say 10. We'll say it adds the amount to the receiving account. All right. Test this as well. Oh, syntax error. Sorry, guys. All right. So we have some failures here that we need to address. So let's actually change the balance. We'll do that a lot like this here, but we'll pass some different values instead of msg.sender and 2. We'll do it like this. Balance of msg.sender. Actually, sorry. Balance of from. We'll deduct it. And balance of, oops. Sorry, my tab completion's not working very well. Balance of 2. We'll say value. All right. So this is actually, deducting the amount from the from account and adding it to the to account. This is just a basic financial transaction, a lot like we saw right here. Run the test, see if that passes. Oh, token instance balance of is not a function. So let's see what we did here. Balance of, typo. I'm full of typos today, guys. Sorry about that. But again, I kind of want to just leave these on the video just so that you guys can see, what real development looks like. All right, and that's passing. It's important to be able to catch your own errors, and it's helpful for me to show you when I catch my own errors so that you don't get discouraged. All right, so that works. And the last thing I want to do is update the allowance. So we'll do that in the tests. So we've called transfer from. We've checked the balance here. Now we want to return the allowance to see if that's changed. And we'll say return token instance allowance from account to say spending account. So again, this is just going to be the keys in the mapping. We'll say the from account is allowed to spend a certain amount for the spending account. Or sorry, the spending account's allowed to spend a certain amount for the from account. Let's say then allowance. All right, and then assert equal allowance. It deducts amount from the allowance. All right, so essentially, we have transferred 10 tokens, and we expect the allowance to be empty at this point because we're not, we don't have anything in there anymore. So we'll run that test. Should fail. All right, fails as we expect. We'll call to number on this. All right, we expect it to be 0, but it's equal to 10. That's because we haven't implemented that in our function yet. So we'll do that now. We'll say allowance. And we will from msg.sender, and we will deduct it. Oops, sorry. Deduct it by the value. I guess I'll explain that. This is the allowance mapping here, that we created earlier that keeps track of, the account that's, added an allowance, and this is the specific account and how many tokens it's allowed to transfer. So we just dig into that with from, right? This is the account that we're spending on behalf of. And, the sender is allowed to spend a certain amount, and we're just decreasing that or decrementing by the value that's passed into the function. Save that, run the tests. All right, it passes. Let's go ahead and commit our changes so far. We can commit everything. We'll call this, well, let's see where we're at. I can't remember actually. Okay, so we're at number 3. We'll commit everything. We'll say this is delegated transfer. And feel free to check out the link in the description below at this point in the tutorial. This is where I'll have the release on GitHub. You can just download this at this commit to follow along if you'd like. So that's it, guys. That is a complete ERC-20 token. This is all the code for a complete ERC-20 token that implements all of the necessary functionality expressed in the ERC-20 standard that we've looked at. We have, written tests against all of these things. So this is quite a robust smart contract. It does everything we expect it to do. We know that it does everything we expect it to do because of these tests. And congratulations for sticking out this far. The next thing that we're going to do in the series is build out the token sale. So be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications below so that you can see that video when it comes out. That'll be the next smart contract that we'll be programming. So until we get onto that and until the next video comes out, thanks for watching Dapp University.